Hey there everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we'll be looking at the last and the final part of the child psychology series. If you haven't checked out the first two parts, I'll be linking them in the description bar below, so do check them out. Today's video will be looking at the last three theories given by B.F. Skinner, by Abraham Maslow and by Albert Bandura. These are the operant conditioning theories, the social learning theory and the hierarchy of needs. So grab your pens and your notebooks and let's jump right in. So starting with the first, that is the operant conditioning theory. Now this was given by B.F. Skinner in the year 1938. Now in the previous video we studied about the classical conditioning theory, and so operant conditioning is an extended version of the classical conditioning theory. This basically deals with the complex behaviors of human beings. Now there was a very famous quote given by B.F. Skinner. He said that the operant conditioning shapes behavior as a sculptor shapes a lump of clay. He said that whatever behavior a human being has, he has learnt it from his environment. So we behave in a particular way and that behavior leads to a set of consequences, and the consequences tell us if we are going to be repeating the behavior in future or not. Like when we were kids, if we did something bad, we'd get scolded or we'd get punished, and that consequence made us realize that we're not supposed to repeat that behavior again. So that is exactly what operant conditioning theory says. Now, as per Skinner, the consequences can be either through reinforcement, through omission, or through punishment. Now we'll be looking at each of these terms in detail. Now B.F. Skinner introduced a new term, that is the law of effect or reinforcement, and he explained this through an experiment that he did on rats. Now he said that whatever behavior, if it is reinforced, or in other words if it is strengthened, then that behavior tends to repeat itself again, and if a behavior is not reinforced or not strengthened, then gradually it will weaken out and it will extinguish itself. Now Skinner in 1948 he conducted an experiment in a box, and he named this box as the Skinner box. Now this box had a lever, it had a pellet dispenser, and it had a pellet tube through which the food would come down into the food cup. Now in the first part of the experiment he placed a very hungry rat inside the box. Now as I said, there was a lever in the box or a handle inside the box. Now when the rat started to run around or move around in the box, he accidentally knocked the lever, and what this did was it dispensed the food from the food container. So now the rat learned that if you press the lever, the food would come into the box. So he started doing this again and again, and so a particular type of behavior is instilled in the rat. So this is positive reinforcement. It strengthens a behavior by providing a consequence which is rewarding to the person. Then in the second part, to explain negative reinforcement, what he did was, in the same Skinner box there, if you can see, there's an electrical barrier or an electrical grid underneath. So as soon as he placed a rat inside the box, the rat was subjected to electrical shocks. Now obviously because of that, the rat again started to run around throughout the box, and it accidentally hit the lever. When it hit the lever, the electrical shock stopped. So now the rat has learned that if at all the electrical current comes again, all he has to do is go and hit the lever and the shock is going to stop. So that is negative reinforcement. That is removal of any kind of negative stimulus to instill a particular kind of behavior in the person. So when we look at this in terms of the dental clinic, for positive reinforcement, as I said, it is a presentation of a good stimulus to get the desired kind of behavior. So if the patient has been a good kid and has gone throughout the procedure without being cranky, without making any kind of noise, cooperating with you, then at the end of the procedure we give some kind of a verbal reward to the child, saying that the child is a really good kid, or we give them a reward in the form of a toy or a sticker. So this is a positive reinforcement. The child knows that if he follows or if he behaves in the same way, the next time he's going to be rewarded again. Negative reinforcement is the removal of a bad stimulus to get the desired kind of behavior. Now care has to be mentioned that the word negative reinforcement is not some kind of negative activity done on the child. It is basically removing negative stimulus so that you can get the kind of behavior that you want from the child. So in this case, if at all the child is not comfortable with the treatment, or if at all the child is not comfortable with the aerotor, so what you do is you ask the child that, okay, I'll switch the aerotor to a spoon excavator if you behave nicely. When you do that, the child starts to behave in the way that you want him to behave. So that is negative reinforcement, that is removal of a bad stimulus to get the desired behavior. Then comes omission. Now, omission is removal of a pleasant stimulus to gain a particular kind of behavior. So, something that the child likes or something that the child is comfortable with. Suppose if the child wants the parent in the operatory, but the child is not behaving in the way you want him to behave. So what you do is you send the parent outside the operatory for a bit. That is omitting something that the child is comfortable with in order to get him to behave the way you want him to behave. Or if at all the child has bought a toy that is his favorite toy, or a security blanket, for some time you take that away, you omit it so that the child behaves in the way you want him to behave. That is omission, removal of a pleasant stimulus. And punishment is an aversive kind of a conditioning in which you present some kind of an unpleasant stimulus to the child. Now this is the example that can be given is that of the hand over mouth exercise, that is home technique. Now this exercise is not acceptable in certain parts of the world because of its punitive action, but it can be used as an example here. So what we do in this case is we cover the child's mouth with our hand, and we do not lift our hand till the child agrees to behave in the way we want him to behave. So that is punishment. You present some kind of an unpleasant stimulus so that the child can behave the way you want him to behave. Punishment can also be done in the form of voice control. So you either use a firm voice, or you use a louder voice to gain the child's attention that whatever kind of behavior he is doing is not going to be acceptable by you and he needs to stop. So that can also be a much lesser aggressive form of punishment, but it can be used as an example. So that is the operant conditioning theory by B.F. Skinner. Now we look at the social learning theory given by Albert Bandura in the year 1963. Now he said that the child learns by looking at the surroundings and by looking at the environment and the society, and whatever behavior the other people are performing, the child learns from that. Now the principles of the social learning theory have 5 main factors, that is the attention, the retention, the production processes, motivation, and the observational factor. So starting with the attention. Now attention is whatever the child is observing in his surroundings. So if the child is brought up in a family where the family is very loving, very caring, there's a lot of respect, then the child is brought up that way. If there's always quarrel happening in the house, when the father and the mother are always fighting, where there's a lot of abuse in the family, the child pays attention to that, and then that goes on to the next phase, which is a retention phase. So the child retains all of that and he keeps it in his mind. Then is a production process where according to what mental age the child is at, the child starts to reproduce or perform those actions, and it has the ability to perform those actions based on whatever it has retained. And then is motivation. Now motivation is any such situation where the child has to perform that same kind of behavior. So now like if we give the example of if the father and the mother are always fighting and the child is observing that, okay, you can talk back to the parent. So when the same situation happens with the child, if the mother is starting to scold the child, the child the reaction is that the child is going to talk back to the parent or not listen or disobey. So that is the motivational phase of the social learning theory, and all of this is comprised in the observational phase. That is, the child has to observe, it has to pay attention, it has to retain, and only then does the child perform a particular type of behavior. Now to explain this, Bandura did a very special experiment. He did it by using a Bobo doll. Now a Bobo doll is like a big inflatable doll. It has the face of a clown painted on it, and if you hit this doll, it comes back. You all must have seen this when we were kids. We've all played with this kind of a doll. So what he did was he took a set of children and he divided the entire set into 2 different groups. Now in the first group, the children were made to sit in a room with this Bobo doll, and there were other toys as well. And another experimenter was put inside the room, an adult person, and the children started to observe that the adult person was hitting this doll, was abusing this doll, was hitting it with a hammer, kicking it, throwing it around. So when the children were given the opportunity, the children did the same. They replicated the same behavior that the adult had performed. In the second group, the children were put with the same experimenter and the same Bobo doll, but this time everything was very calm. The experimenter did not hit the clown. The experimenter was playing with other toys in the room, and everything was quite calm. And when given the opportunity, the children replicated the same behavior. There was no aggression of any sort, no verbal abuse, nothing. So this is the experiment that he used to explain the principles of the social learning theory, that the child pays attention, it retains that behavior, and when given the opportunity, when there's a motive behind it, the child will perform the same activity. Now, the social learning theory is very important when it comes to our dental practice, because we use something known as modeling. So if you have a cranky child, somebody who does not listen to any orders passed, or is not willing to sit on the dental chair, so to model this child, you bring another child in the clinic who, on the contrary, is very calm, very quiet, very collective, very enthusiastic to get the treatment done. And when the cranky child observes this child, observes the behavior pattern of this child, observes the way he's getting his treatment done, the child starts to pay attention to that procedure, it retains it, and when given the opportunity, it tries to replicate the same kind of behavior. So the social learning theory plays a very important role in modeling. And then we come to the last theory, which is the hierarchy of needs given by Abraham Maslow in the year 1943. Now, this theory explains a human being's needs and wants and desires in the form of a pyramid. Now, the base of the pyramid, which is the largest part, showcases the most basic needs and wants that a human being has, and the tip of the pyramid showcases the least amount of needs that he has in his entire life. Now, Maslow divided the entire pyramid into 5 different levels. Now, level 1 is the physiological needs, level 2 is the safety needs, level 3 is the love and the belongingness, level 4 is the self-esteem, and level 5 is the self-actualization. Now, level 1, as I said, is the physiological needs, which are the most basic needs, like your food, air, clothing, sleep, water. All of these things are something which are the most important needs of a human being, and if the person does not get this, then there's a lot of irritation, a lot of discomfort experienced by the person. Level 2 is the safety needs. Now, these are both physiological as well as mental. So it's a security of our house and our belongings and everything that's close to us, as well as our body. Now, the safety needs, as explained by Maslow, is much higher in terms of children as compared to that of adults. When the level 2 is a little damaged in kids, they start feeling scared a lot. Then is level 3, which is love and belongingness. Now, this is the relationship that you have with your family, with your friends, with your peer groups, the belongingness that you feel with them, and the sense that you want to be accepted by the people around you. So that is the love and belonging stage. Then is level 4, which is the self-esteem stage. Now, as we know, human beings are very competitive creatures. We always want to be respected, we want to achieve a lot in life, we want to be successful, and that is what level 4 inculcates. Our self-esteem, the confidence that we have, the respect that we want other people, the people who are surrounding us, to give us. So that's the self-esteem stage. Then is the self-actualization stage. Now, this is the smallest part of the pyramid, and according to Maslow, this stage is achieved by people who have achieved everything below this stage. So up until level 1 to level 4, everybody has achieved everything, and then we reach the self-actualization stage. Now, this has been referred to a stage where people are called the happily ever after people. In this stage, that a person has looked at or experienced everything in life, and now the person knows what he actually wants in life. They have completely segregated all the needs and all the desires and all the wants, and now they focus themselves on something which actually matters to them. So at this stage, the person has a desire for self-fulfillment. There are very peculiar characteristics of people who have reached the level 5. Now, people at this stage or this level are very creative. They do not have any kind of prejudices. They accept themselves and they accept others just the way they are. They have a very unusual kind of working sense, and they're very capable of accepting things just the way they are. So those were the hierarchy of needs by Abraham Maslow, and that brings us to the end of the child psychology series. I hope that you guys had fun learning them just as much as I did explaining them to you. As always, if there are any doubts or any questions, please leave them in the comment below and I'd be happy to answer them. Also, tell me in the comments below which is the theory which resonates with you the most. Which is the theory which you feel explains a human being or the human characteristic in the most amazing way? If you like this video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel. Bye bye.